Welcome back, everyone. Today we have LittleBigPlanet designer Kengo Kurimoto. Can you give us a quick explanation of who you are before we move on to the questions?
So yes, I was design lead on LittleBigPlanet 1 and 2. And I actually started off as an artist to begin with. So I just wanted to get into the games industry, and I had experience previously doing CGI and all that kind of thing. And but as I got into it and started to sort of find my role, to begin with, I was doing concepts and that kind of thing. And as I just saw the game develop, I was thinking, well, the level designer seems like that's where it's all happening, really. It seems like that's where all the parts of the game were coming together. So that's when I asked and said, look, would I be able to transfer over to the design side? And they very kindly said yes. And so I just sort of started playing around. And in the end of it, I actually ended up leading the team. I think it was a nice thing about it was that it was the studio was really small then. I think I was about number 11 or something like that in the team. So things were established, but still quite open. So, and that's the thing which I really like about small teams is that you can move around, and they always wanted to have people who were quite multidisciplinary in what they did. So it just meant that you don't get sort of pigeonholed into one role, and that really suited me well.
Right. Did that sort of draw you to Media Molecule? Like, what made you join them?
It's a funny thing. It was actually like me starting to want to work in the games industry was I saw Spore. I don't know if you remember that game, but Will Wright's Spore. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, that's what you can do with games. And I think it was just around about that time was a real raft of very innovative games. And when I started thinking about where I'd like to work, I'd heard sort of nightmare stories where you could work in sort of places where you're a big production place where you're sort of modeling blades of grass and stuff like that. And I was like, that's not really me. And I remember seeing an advert in Edge magazine, and they had this sort of ice cream graphic, and it had individual names as each one of those little balls of ice cream, and it had names on it. And then at the top it sort of said there was a hole. That was it. There was a hole, and it said "you" on it. And that was when I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I wanted. And and then weirdly at the same time, there was I was at a barbecue, and a friend of mine, I knew he worked in the games industry. He said, oh yeah, my friends have set up a games company. You should apply. And it turned out to be the same place. And I don't know, there was something throughout the whole thing. There was something very, I don't know, like cosmic about the whole thing. It just felt like it had to happen. Lots of weird synchronicities and things like that. So I applied and got in. It was amazing.
Oh.
But funny enough, actually, I was also, in terms of getting in, because before that I'd had experience doing architectural work, and it was in sort of CGI and modeling the buildings and all that kind of thing. So it was the same software as 3D Studio Max I was using, but I didn't have any experience doing sort of characters or any of that kind of thing. So I actually just made a short film for my short show reel. So the idea was that I could learn all the skills beforehand and then have something to prove that I could do it. And so I made that short film, and just, it was just finding all sorts of tutorials and things like that. And that's what I showed them in order to get in. So yeah, it was quite an amazing time.
I'm curious, how was it working at Media Molecule? What was your experience there?
It was intense. It was really intense. I remember the first day when I went there. So it was above a bathroom shop. So it was sort of in this slightly industrial area of Guildford. And there was a bathroom shop, and there was this little staircase with a pink door. And then you go up this staircase, this metal staircase. I was thinking, what is this place? It's very weird. And then you just went, and this is when it was like really small, so they just got this one, I think 1 or 2 rooms in there, and but all the walls were completely covered in art. So there was just art from the game. There was all the pre-visuals and of Sackboy and the world and all that kind of thing, all the stuff which Kareem had been doing and Francis and all that. And I was just blown away. It felt like felt a bit like a den, which of just mad creative inventors. And then so I remember coming in and just seeing the sort of prototype. They showed me all that kind of thing, and I thought, wow, this is going to be really big. And but in terms of the actual process, I mean, it's just intensely collaborative, and it was very certainly at that stage it was very unhierarchical as well. I mean, that was always part of the philosophy, was that it was a meritocracy, and just best idea wins. And obviously, I mean, all of these things sound very nice as an ideal. The reality is that if it is a meritocracy, then people are going to be challenging people with other ideas and things like that. So I remember it being very intense, quite exhausting sometimes, quite irritating sometimes, but overall, there was just such immense respect between each other, because everybody was just so good at what they did. I mean, I was so just when I first walked in, I thought, wow, these people, they another thing actually, because I actually started when I started, it was just before the big GDC announcement, and the thing which I really remember from this still was just quite how calm the office was at the time. I was thinking, well, this is a really massive deadline, and this essentially unveiling of the game into the world, and it just felt very calm and orderly. And I definitely put that down to Siobhan, the executive producer at the time. I mean, she was I don't know, there was something amazing about that, because I kind of came from coming from an architectural background. You tend to crunch a lot and all that kind of thing, and it was just really impressive. Just even that, the vibe in the office. But obviously we did have some major deadlines and things like that, and of which there was a bit of crunching and things. But there was a certain amount of I don't know. It was just how do I describe it? It was just an intense, but we're all going in the same direction. That's I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that I felt like the arguments, of which there were many, were very just very generative in the end, and it was great. It was definitely one of the highlights of my career.
Do you happen to know, because you were the sort of the mastermind behind the LittleBigPlanet 1 Islands background, do you happen to know why the old background ended up being scrapped for the new one that we see now in the game?
The original plan was that there's going to be 12 themes, so 12 different countries, and then each country would have 3 sub-themes to it. So, for instance, Japan, the original plan was that there was the Zen Garden one, which did make it, I think, pretty cool. And then there was the Akihabara world. So that's kind of like like the sort of Tokyo city kind of thing. So I did the concept for that, and also the Tsukiji market, which is the fish market there. So that was the original plan for those, and then only the Zen Garden one made it in the end, and obviously a lot of the countries got dropped as well. So it was originally supposed to be 36 backgrounds, and was it 8? I think.
Wow, I think so. Yeah.
The original intention was that you just give the players as much stuff to create with, and it's a real shame as well, because some of them were great. Like, so for instance, one of the backgrounds which actually got made was the English seaside theme. So again, there was going to be 3 English sub themes, and and that seaside theme actually had a whole load of levels made for it as well, but that actually got chopped quite late into the production, and there was some cool stuff in there. There was some kind of like squid-like things which swam along, and there's quite a lot of bits with the jetpack and things as if you were swimming in the water. But yeah, I can see why. It was definitely the sort of flakiest one, but it did have a massive pirate ship in the level, which looks cool, and I think that went out I think that's on some videos, that pirate ship. But yeah, so that one never made it as well. But it's just time, isn't it? It's time and quality, because ultimately, I think it's better to have less, which is good, than too much stuff.
I'm a bit curious more so about your role, because you mentioned earlier that you were a designer, not just a level designer. So what did you mainly do in LittleBigPlanet 1 apart from level design?
So yeah, we're at Media Molecule, like, we didn't tend to use the word level designers, we use the word designers, and the reason why is because we often did stuff more than level design. So particularly at the early stages of the project, because there's just so much to do, and it was all just very hands on deck about it. It's sort of like, we just do what's needed to be done. But say, for instance, like the 3 layers, like that whole thing, like to begin with, that was that you could have as many layers as you wanted. So and it wasn't even the idea of layers. What you did is you could just sort of draw out the shapes and things like that. We're doing it with a mouse to begin with, and you could just sort of place them wherever you wanted within in Z, essentially. And there wasn't even a set sort of depth to how you could make sort of really deep ones, and there was definitely some benefits to that in terms of visuals and things. So there's always this kind of like fight between visuals and the sort of usability of it and all that kind of thing. And so essentially the whole 3 layers thing with the sort of thin cardboard bits in between, the thin layers in between it, that happened as a result of a conversation with me and Dave. And Dave was just sort of like, I think he was really keen to simplify the whole thing, because you don't really want to be having to think too much in terms of Z. And so he was like, like the number of layers, could we just make it like 3? And I was a bit like, oh, okay, because obviously some of the stuff we made was dependent on it being much more than that. We had a lot more sort of depth within the scenes and things. And the first thing which I thought was just sort of like, I know that like Kareem, the art director, was really, there was the sort of cardboard, and that was a really like core visual to the whole thing, really. And it's like, well, if we only have 3 layers, then we've lost that cardboard. You can have the chunky cardboard, but not the thin cardboard. And just a discussion with Dave, it was like suddenly we had the idea of, okay, well, could we put the thin ones in between the thick ones? And the key thing being that if you've got a piece here, then you can just stick a bit of cardboard on the front and then put a bolt through it, and that just really worked. So that's one example where like being integrated with the people who make the code and make the system of it, being very working very closely with the designers in terms, because they obviously know what's going to be needed for all the levels and things like that. That was a really a good example of that, and I think it was just the right compromise. I think the usability that we got from Dave's intuition there was absolutely the right thing to do. At the same time, I don't think we compromised too much in terms of the art style. I know that Kareem, you did want some of the things like to be able to be sort of turned a bit in that direction, but yeah, ultimately keeping it like that, I think, was just the right decision. And but there's other stuff too, like for instance the switches in that. Again, that was as within the level design department, it's kind of how do we get more interactivity, because there's so much, because before, like right at the beginning, it was just literally an obstacle course, so you just go plop 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 plop, put down objects and things like that, and then you just sort of run through it. But obviously that there's only so much of that you can do before you start wanting more complex things in terms of challenges and things like that, to go and fetch things or whatever. And so that was just kind of like sitting down and just talking through of like, well, what kind of games would you want to make with this? And it was just kind of then distilling all of those down into individual gadgets. And like Mark Healy, he was absolutely fantastic at all that kind of thing. And but yeah, I remember that there was talk about, let's make the Switches and things, a second release and all that kind of stuff, and I was absolutely adamant that that would be the first release, and I'm really glad we did. But one of the nicest things about it was that making the when you have an idea in your head of what some of these gadgets are for. So say, for instance, the I think it's called the magnetic key or something, where you've got to attach a key to something in a sensor. If it comes near it, it sends a signal. That was kind of, in my head, that was a very a cool way of doing fetch quests or whatever, just being able to detect that kind of thing. But Victor, he just took it to another level and then started making kind of logic gates and things. Like you see it in the end boss in LittleBigPlanet 1 with that little thing in the chest, and it's essentially little pistons and things which move the keys out of the range of the sensor. And that's what, so essentially he started making sort of computers in a way, like programmable stuff, not programmable, but made like the ability to do so much more complex things as something which was only intended to, as a fetch thing. And that was amazing. That was really exciting.
Yeah.
Like, actually, with that as well, like I kind of wish we'd done this more. Originally, I was quite keen for when it's almost like, in maths lessons, when the teacher says, show you're working, I was quite keen for those things to be visible, like how everything works to be visible. In the end, we didn't do it as much as I wish, actually. I wish we'd shown it more, because there's something nice about, I think that's what I love about LBP, was that everything you see is real and it works. And that, I think there's something very compelling about that. So I wish we'd shown more of how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and what you touched on, those little computers idea, the idea of like AND gates and OR gates and XOR, all that stuff you can do with the logic is pretty fascinating. But I'm curious though, a little bit about the logic. Why exactly were some of the, because I know, we both know in late LittleBigPlanet 1, when LittleBigPlanet 2 was kind of in the works, there were certain pieces of logic like the anti-gravity tweaker and a few others that were, I suppose, for LittleBigPlanet 2, but maybe you guys had considerations of adding them in LittleBigPlanet 1 maybe, because there are older designs like for the visuals of those pieces of logic. So why did you guys not put them in LittleBigPlanet 1? Why were they saved for LittleBigPlanet 2?
So the way that LittleBigPlanet 2 happened, so originally the idea was that LittleBigPlanet 1 was it, so that was it. There wasn't an intention to make a second one. It was just going to continue as one. And then the all those kind of electronics which became very prominent in the second one were actually going to be a pack later down. So the idea was that you just have lots of DLC and that was it, sort of thing. And all those things you're talking about there were going to be in something called the arcade pack. So this is something which Mark was driving, and he was just sort of like, I just want to be able to control things directly. I think it was even called Direct Control at the time. So was it Controlinator? The Controlinator.
Yeah.
Was originally called Direct Control, and it was going to be in the arcade pack. And what happened is that we were developing that, and that was going to be like the major release, like one of the major DLC releases. And as we went along, we realized that, because it kind of grew very organically, all of this kit, because that's the thing, you sort of have an idea for what it's going to be, and then people just use it in a completely different way than you ever imagine it's going to be. And then over that time, we kind of developed all the gadgets which you needed. And I remember that distinctly, actually, there was a point when it was just a mess. And this is probably the versions you've seen. And they were kind of like, there was no uniform kind of visual language to the whole thing, because some of it had been, started in LPP1 with a very particular thing, and then as time went on, there was just this stuff, and it wasn't visually coherent. So I think I did it. I did a visual how do you just make it all the same family kind of thing, and so that's why. So all those original things then got updated to something which had a certain amount of consistency to it.
Right. What was it? Yeah. What was it like designing the logic pieces?
It was. I think it was one of those things where it all happened out of necessity. So I don't think it was ever. I mean, there was just the obvious ones that you wanted. And I think like Mark was definitely the brains behind it. So things like having the controlinator, being able to control, set the gravity on things and all that kind of stuff. It kind of, he sort of did the first stab at that, and then there's kind of like when people use it, then you sort of go, oh, okay, so it'd be good if you could do this or you could do that. So it was it was remarkably smooth, actually, and and the turnaround was really fast. So it was, when it comes to having this kit, it was within a few days that we got that stuff to play with, and it was very responsive, and looking back at that, I'm really grateful for that. It was fantastic in terms of being a designer. You sort of have an idea, and you can say, actually, I think we could do with this, and then it gets made, the art gets made for the thing, and it's in the game really soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean. Little mini therapy session here. What traumas do you have with the PC editor in LittleBigPlanet? Because I remember a lot of people saying how bad it was, like how horrible it was to use.
That's so funny. I think my main gripe, I remember getting like almost having a rage quit over this, and it wasn't so much the PC editor, it was the physics engine at the time, and it had this thing where, like, say for instance, you've got two objects like this and they're sitting on top of each other. Over time, it can just sort of like drop down a bit like that, so it intersects slightly between the thing, and what it will do is it will just push it out again like that. And all of that thing makes total sense. But what it would mean is that if you've got loads of stuff stacked on top of each other, then if you went away for a bit with the game playing and you came back, it's just all bounced, because it just sort of, it cumulatively adds up. So everything would just bounce out of the way. So imagine trying to make a level. It was the Skulldozer level, actually, I remember I was doing, and just not that many things stacked on top of each other. But it was that kind of thing where in a game which is physics is the core thing, where it would just, you come back after a few minutes and then it's just bounced apart. That was really annoying. really annoying. But that got fixed quite late as well. What else was there in terms of? I didn't mind the editor that much, actually. I mean, I think there was definitely a beauty to it. So, like at the time we were using things like 3D Studio Max, which is quite buggy, really, and is quite annoying. But there were some things about the editor which were so slick in many ways, and like in kind of like just the fact that you could just have the game running, the physics engine running. You can go click, 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 then this object would just sort of drop out there and just behave with physics and all that kind of thing. There was something really nimble about it, and I really appreciate that. So as much as I did curse about the the editor, it was I do appreciate it now, but there were certain things, and this is just anything which is early in development, and it's that thing of all the coders are trying to progress the game at the same time, so there was a bit of a gripe sometimes, like, come on, just help us with the editor and all that kind of thing. But maybe I've got suppressed trauma. I mean, I can't even remember. I do remember there was a picture of Johnny Hopper's face on as one of the icons. I can't remember why he did that, and I can't remember what the button did.
You mentioned the Skulldozer level. What other kind of levels did you design in Little Big Planet 1 specifically, and how did the planning process happen?
So the levels, I remember I did that snakes level. I think quite annoyed quite a lot of people. You know, the one with the sort of Mexican snakes thing where they sort of roll through those channels.
Serpentine.
Kind of yeah, that was it. I remember doing the guy who throws the bombs as well. Did that one. Did quite a few in Little Big Planet 1. I was more hands-on in Little Big Planet 1 than I was in 2 actually. What else did I do? Giraffes level. Actually, fun enough, Giraffes level was one of the first levels which I made, which actually got into the game. So obviously, because I started off as an artist, and there was a sort of trial period to see, like, can they actually do this? And so the African Giraffes level was one of the first. Can't remember how many. But the process, the main thing about the process was that because it's, it has 2 functions. It has to be a game in its own right, and it also needs to be a demonstration of what you can create. So I guess that's what makes it different to a normal game development. And so for that reason, I guess this applies for normal games too, but each level needed to have a distinct idea. So we called it, like a level hook. And I think that was quite important in terms of a top-down brief, really, where you're either kind of demonstrating a gadget of some sort, or it could just be you're using gadgets in a normal way, but you're kind of it just needs to be really clear. So if you'd say, what is this level about, you can just say it quite clearly. So that was quite big. But yeah, I think it was one of those things. Sometimes the levels came from the theme, so yeah, but most often we would start making them as a white box thing and just fiddling with them and just finding out what's fun. And Kareem was really upset about that, because he was wanting the theme to inspire it, but generally it happened sort of ground up in terms of the gameplay first. And but there was the times when it really worked was when someone will come up with something and go, well, that's just obviously have to go into the Japan theme or this or that. So it was but definitely it just started with fiddling. And but then, so I remember there's this point where we didn't, we're having to ship the whole thing, and we didn't quite have enough content. And so there was a point where somebody thought, like, because a lot of the level designers, they'd sort of fiddle with stuff and then get bored of it and then just leave it. So at that point, I sort of went like everyone, I'm going to go into your computer and look into your bin and find all the stuff in there. And there was some really fantastic stuff where people had just, just got bored of it. So I sort of pulled it all out of the bin and we're like, right, we can use this, we can use this, we can use this. So, it was, it was both planned and quite chaotic as well.
Right. Yeah.
But there was a lot of playing. There was a lot of play testing. So the whole office would play it and all that kind of thing. So, it was we had a lot of good feedback.
I'm curious about the this kind of ties in with the PC editor. What was your experience working with the palette levels?
So I mean, there was lots of sort of workflow things. I don't remember that being a bad way of doing it.
Yeah.
I think there might have been some instances where if you accidentally pressed play, then obviously all the objects just sort of fall to the floor, and then you could save it, and I think that caused problems. But I can't remember that being particularly bad in terms of. But I do vaguely remember that. I even remember that sort of weird sort of grey-blue background it had.
Yeah.
There was something called socket. It was like a little thing like that with one eye and had 2 little black legs to it. And I think the original plan with that was that you kind of like stuff it into things, and then it would just sort of it was a way of making things come to life.
Kind of going on the track of like unused stuff, and maybe things being thrown away in development. Sometimes objects or story levels would contain unused material.
I've got a feeling some of it was just legacy, and I think someone forgot to take it out.
Oh,
I mean, it was
really?
always a worry because there was lots of stuff which was, sort of developed and then used, and then and then we just didn't remember to take it out again. So I think that was it. I think the lava material, that was in the olden days before you could set things on fire.
Oh,
I
yeah,
can't remember.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be why. So before, if you wanted to have something on fire, then it would be a particular material.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be why that lava material was around. There was I remember there was also there was a creative material as well, which is this mad sort of glowing material. And originally the game was going to have like creative challenges where you could make stuff in level. I know that the LBP3 ended up running with that, and I think they did a good job of that. But that's something which ended up getting cut as well. And but yeah, that involved a bit of material where if Sackboy stands on that, then he can then use pop it kind of thing. And there's all these issues where you could sort of detach, because you can use pop it, then you could detach that bit of material, and then you could be standing on it, pick it up with pop it, and then fly while standing.
Right.
So there was just a whole bunch of stuff where we're like, you know what, let's just not have this. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's a bit of that material left in there somewhere.
Oh.
I do remember things like the bevels and things like that. That was all very cool, actually. That was some really good tools to how the bevels were made on the materials. And yeah, it was. And one of the things which was sad, which actually got worse, was that there used to be like a really good squidginess on the fabric materials, and it got broken somewhere along the way and never fixed. And I was always a bit sad about that because it looked fantastic. So like, if you were on some of the material, when he'd walk on it, it would really properly deform. And yeah, that's one of those sad things where it just got lost as a thing.
What?
Yeah, I know.
Darn, I would have loved to seen that.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. Yeah. But I remember the way that the bevels worked. There was a mad thing. So obviously, like in terms of the game, what it knows, it's just a vector shape. So it's you just sort of draw your thing, and then the way that the bevels work is that for each material, an artist can go in and just set what that cross section of the whole thing is, and like that sort of padded sort of fabricy material with the stitching and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I remember you draw the cross section in a line kind of thing, and that stitching, they would sort of draw the material coming around like that, and then you'd have like this little bit which has got the stitch, and you could set the material as a different material, and that's what would make the stitching. And so you'd get this mad kind of bevel shaped like this. And but yeah, it was really it was very powerful, and the artist did some amazing stuff with it. And yeah, it was very I really liked that. Again, I was really impressed with the tools. And I remember as well that something not to take for granted just at the time was that Alex was really big on kind of real-time updates. So like in the olden days, well, not even like during that kind of period, a lot of people would have to, if you make a change to the textures and things, you'd have to rebuild the game. And obviously that really slows down artists' workflow, and he was really made it so that you can change a texture and it automatically updates in game. And I didn't fully appreciate that because I hadn't worked on other games before that. And but that's massive. Like really, they loved us.
That's awesome. Yeah, going back to kind of the fire material, do you happen to know why it was changed from having a fiery effect in LittleBigPlanet 1 to having like no effect in LittleBigPlanet 2? You know how the fire, like there's this sort of kind of like particle sim above it in 1, but in 2 it's completely gone. It's removed.
Yeah. I think like that's another thing where I think that it got worse. It's such a shame. Like I remember when that fire first came in, and that was Anton who did that. And what's it again? I think there was some game which had this like a turbulence fluid effect on it, and he saw it and was like, God, I've got to do that. And I remember that same system which did the fire also was the same thing which did the collection of the bubbles and things like that. And then and then it got replaced in 2 for some reason. There was fire there, wasn't there? I can't even remember.
There was. Yeah.
It just wasn't as good, was it?
No.
Yeah. I don't even know why that was. Maybe it was a performance thing. I don't know. It's because I thought that fire was absolutely brilliant. It was so. I just loved the way it responded to all the the movements of things, and it just. I remember just being absolutely blown away when they did that.
And I mean, speaking of like, fire, wind, and earth. Let's talk about water a little bit. What was the idea of making water free in LittleBigPlanet 2 and then charging for it in LittleBigPlanet 1?
So it was the Pirates of the Caribbean thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a funny one, that water one. It felt that felt like one of the things that just wasn't that well done. Like it didn't behave in the way that I would have liked it to. But it's because you kind of want it to be contained in things and all that. But obviously, I really get why you wouldn't or couldn't be able to do that. I think in terms of I think that so it was Pirates of the Caribbean was okay. So we need a big gameplay hook for this pack because it's such a big license deal, and so it was like, what is that feature? And water seemed like the obvious one, and I'm guessing that it's one of those things that I think quite a few people used it. So when it came to LBP2, let's just make it default. I'm guessing something like that. I mean, I don't, I wasn't ever involved in the kind of strategic kind of the big market idea type things, but I'm guessing that's why it was done like that.
Do you happen to know like why the sackbots were scrapped from LittleBigPlanet 1?
That will be because of the arcade pack, probably. So that was meant for the. I can't exactly remember when everything came in, but yeah, I'm guessing before the decision was made to make LBP2 as a separate thing, that'll be why, I guess. The idea was that it would just be, we would just support it with DLC from then on. But I think what was the reasoning? I can't remember what was the reasoning for going for LBP2. I think it might have been something like the way that the DLC deal had been set up just meant it wasn't sustainable financially. So I think that was why, all of these things tend to be very complicated in terms of, all the Sony things and all that. So I kind of was aware of that going on, but yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of people like getting irrationally upset over DLC and throwing the middle finger, let's talk about the middle finger a little bit. What was this is a bit random, but what was the reason for the middle finger Easter egg in the Factory of a Better Tomorrow? That one where you have the hand and you can like pull the levers to move the fingers up and down, and you had to get it right in the right combination to move forward. It was like that, kind of like that rock punk hand formation, but you could also make it do a middle finger.
That's so funny. I think that level, it was either Victor or Christoph. And if it probably might have been Christoph. And Christoph loves putting Easter eggs into everything. I mean, there was all sorts of ones when his face comes up. I think he even got into trouble at one point for doing this at times when we should have been knocking the game down. But I'm guessing that was him.
That's hilarious. Wow.
He's funny, Christoph.
Yeah. And continuing on LittleBigPlanet 2, do you happen to know why the characters changed so drastically between like the trailers compared to the final release? Like Clive looks so much different in the trailer, and so does Da Vinci. Da Vinci had more of a newspaper look in the early trailers, but then he ended up getting a jumpsuit sort of thing. How come?
Just development. It just, it's one of those things, isn't it? You do it, and then you look at it, and after a while you think, that could be better. I do remember there was that was quite a big decision to go with those characters, because obviously they were sort of made of cardboard and things in the first game, and just that whole idea of just having like a whole character customization was, it's almost slightly against the philosophy of that you can use all the bits and things like that. So, it's I don't know how I felt about that. I can see why it was done. I feel like that. I don't know. Would it have been better if there was something nice about the sort of consistency of the way it was up until that point. And but again, I understand why it was done.
Yeah, and speaking of our good old cardboard friends back in LittleBigPlanet 1, do you happen to know why the LBP1 characters make an appearance in Patience Our Virtue, that specific level from Eve's Asylum? Why are they in the asylum?
I think they all went mad. Like we did at the time. Yes, I do remember that. I do remember them doing that. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's it is. Yeah, I think that was must have been. I think that was Francis who did that, and it's I guess it was indicative of all of our mindsets.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, speaking like about these levels, like how we not only play them and see these, cool little Easter eggs, but how we actually get into the levels in the first place, how we enter them. Let's talk about the story Earths a little bit. Why did the story levels change? And this goes back to the trailers. Why did they change from being arranged in more of a cluster kind of shape in the trailers to being arranged in a circular sort of layout shape in the final version?
Yeah, I think maybe they just. I think that was Kareem who did that. I'm guessing he just thought it looked better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's some of the decisions, are just a very intuitive thing, and sometimes some things are just because a lot. I mean, I think a philosophy of the studio in general was just get it into the game quick. So that's probably why there's quite a lot of changes you see between steps and things. And and sometimes it stays like that. Like we all laugh about that. Just that you do a placeholder and it's like placeholder, as in that we're going to run out of time and it's going to be the final. But I definitely prefer that as a development model. In that, sometimes things might be a bit rough around the edges, and all of these things can you don't get round to making it better or whatever. But what it does do is it means that you can just get on with making the game, and I think I definitely think perfectionism is an enemy of creativity. It's just get it in, a bit rough and ready, and but the danger to that is sometimes you get used to something being a bit rubbish when it could be better. So that's the counter side.
Right.
I think there is definitely just because of thinking about it, the speed at which it was all made. Certainly, LBP1 was made at such a speed that it's there wasn't that much time to keep continuously tweak things, and I think for the better as well, actually.
Yeah. Do you think that's why LittleBigPlanet 1 feels homemade and rough around the edges, as Alex Evans put it, compared to the other games?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, say for instance in the level design department, there's only one or two people who actually had any games like industry experience. So I think I think there was there's 7 of us, I think, by the end of it. That's including Phil from, because we borrowed him from Sony, and he was very experienced. And then Mark Stevenson, he had experience. But things like Victor, we hired him out of school. He came to do work experience, but he had a relationship with Mark because of Ragdoll Kung Fu, and he just designed all these cool characters and things like that. And then Mark said, "Oh, you can come here for work experience," and he made such good stuff when he was there that they were like, "Well, once you finish school, you can have a job." And so yeah, Victor. So that was Victor, and then me. I came from sort of an architectural background. And obviously, I played lots of games, so kind of knew it from that way. But yeah, and yeah, so it was. There was a certain. There was definitely veterans. Like obviously, Mark Healy has been in the industry for years and really knows it. And and same with Dave. And so like that's kind of like I guess the kind of the steering group was highly experienced, but within that there were quite a few inexperienced people. And but I think I think the preference would be they'd rather people who were a bit mad and a bit rough and a bit sort of and a bit more raw in creativity than someone who's necessarily got loads of experience and all that. So that's kind of where it went. So I guess that was why it might feel a bit rough.
Well, I mean, in it being right, in it being rough, there is still a lot of charm to it, and one of the biggest elements of charm is the music. How would you say music influenced level design?
You know what? It happened in very much in parallel. So it was I definitely loved the soundtrack in LPP. It was fantastic. And so when we're playing it, and obviously we get to put the things that we'll put the music in. Often it would get changed. Like the sort of sound effects and things we did were very much placeholder because Kenny would definitely make sure that everything was absolutely right. But yeah, it was it was I don't think it played that much of a thing other than setting the atmosphere, I guess. So, and a lot of that kind of happened more in the polish phase of things. I wouldn't say it inspired the thing. Although obviously when you got tunes like battles and things like that in it, it's you sort of let's have a level which is like that kind of thing.
Another element of LittleBigPlanet 1 that didn't quite make it, but it made it in LittleBigPlanet 2 were kind of the movements in the backgrounds. I don't know if you remember that, but do you think the movements in LittleBigPlanet 2's backgrounds were a good creative decision?
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, I think I've seen people use it in an interesting way. I mean, the one which immediately strikes me. I can't remember. So in the Victoria levels, was there a big thing like a astrolabe type thing spinning?
Yeah.
I can't remember if I actually made it into the game. So, yeah, there's things like that. That was me actually. I made that. And yeah, and funny enough, I made that as a concept to begin with, and then forgot to check it in. And I got lost, and but in the end, I think it was Fireproof who made those backgrounds. So they were outsourced at the time because we were so busy. And but yeah, I think it's one of those. Like maybe they could be distracting. Maybe I think there was definitely people using the backgrounds, like using sort of select areas of the backgrounds more because they had more in them, didn't they? Because the first ones actually, when you look at them, are pretty basic, and I think it's one of those things where we were just being cautious in terms of the amount that, because obviously developing for the PS3 and all that kind of thing, we sort of had a sense that it was going to be very powerful, but at the same time we didn't want to overcook it. And but yeah, I think the ones in LPP2 were much more kind of grand and things, and we did think of things in terms of making it so that you could frame bits of level within those backgrounds, so making use of those more.
And about making use of cool elements in level design. Let's talk about LittleBigPlanet 2's intro level a little bit. Do you happen to know what the reason was behind making Left Bank 2 into sort of a retro 8-bit song for the intro level? Did you incorporate animated materials into the level because you wanted it to have like a more futuristic kind of theme?
Yeah. It was Rex. I think it was Rex who did that level. I can't even remember who did that level actually now. It was I mean, that was definitely, it was kind of like, funnily enough, it started off as kind of science as the sort of overall idea, but it ended up moving more into science fiction and all that. And I can't remember. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. But I mean, maybe let's talk a bit more about like the materials. And this is just generally not specific to the intro level, but just like LBP as a whole. What would you say was your favorite animated material in the game? Like one that had cool effects?
Yeah. I remember the holographic material was very good. Again, it was quite a break from like the original idea of but it was just so useful, and so I really get it, and I thought it looked quite cool as well. What are the materials are they? I'm quite old school when it comes down to that. I just really like the cardboard, and I really like the squishy material, fabrics and things like that. Yeah, I mean, all we had to play with there is all we could do is shift the texture map on the whole.
The UVs,
thing.
yeah.
So, yeah. I think yeah. So things like the holographic one, I thought were done very well for that, because I think it looks like there's more than that going on, but it is just shifting UVs, and yeah. Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's a really cool thing. One of the things I love about LittleBigPlanet is the fact that in LittleBigPlanet 2, it literally called that tool where you can shift the UVs the UV tool. And what's fascinating about that is that years later, a lot of people, such as myself, became programmers, and it's because of the fact that LittleBigPlanet just illustrated these concepts of game design and stuff so well.
Yeah.
It's really
so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny because Mark Healy was really annoyed about that.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
He at the time, I remember it was we were shipping, and I think he was like, "Why is this called UV tool?" Because the whole thing was, it was supposed to be a non-technical thing. So I think he wanted it to be something like, I don't know, pattern mover or something, like whatever it would be that described it in English kind of thing. And I remember him being really annoyed by that, and it was too late because we'd locked down all the words in the game,
lambs.
and
yeah,
you couldn't change it. But lambs, now that was annoying. Lambs, just that word just made me shudder.
Oh dear, really? Do you want to go into that?
Was a total pain in the ass. It was just one of those things. I think it was one of those. I think I'm not sure if that's a Sony thing, but there were certain bits of software which were, just so archaic and rubbish, and I had to spend quite a long time in that. I think things like even all the inventory stuff and all that kind of stuff, but I don't remember that being fun at all. It just felt really bleak.
Oh dear.
So this is not why I got into this at all.
Oh dear. So sorry I resurfaced those memories, but you'll be glad to know now, I think it was 4 years ago, I made a tool that could convert those trans files, which had all the lamb keys and translations in them in English, to like a JSON file that you could edit in a notepad. And you just do mass replace and add new entries and delete them, and then just convert them back to a game. So why
weren't you there to do that for us at the time?
Oh boy, time is relentless.
It is, isn't it?
It's crazy. But about I suppose kind of seeing all these things for what they are. In LittleBigPlanet's development, I'm sure there were some elements of the game that maybe just were a pain to implement, and I don't know about this feature in particular, but I remember LittleBigPlanet 2, it wasn't until LittleBigPlanet 2 that you could see a total player count of how many people played a level. You could see the individual player counts, but you couldn't see the total one. And I'm curious, you may not know this, but were you able to see how many people played the story mode levels in total in LittleBigPlanet 1? Just on the developer side?
Yeah, I remember there was a big thing which had a big sort of like screen thing which said how many people were online at a particular time. But yeah, we might have had that information. I remember there was a whole telemetry thing went in, and we didn't use it that much, I must admit. I think just again the nature of just the sort of the busyness. There was certain things. Maybe other people might have noticed it, but I don't recall that at all.
Yeah, I'm interested about the telemetry. What can you remember about like being a part of that if you were?
They're just things like heat maps about where people are dying, and just sort of, yeah. I remember it was quite a big job to go in, but ultimately, I think just knowing where a lot of people die, it's kind of where you'd expect in a way. So, yeah, I remember it just not being that useful, and it's just much better. I think the best way really to test a level is just sit there and watch someone play it, because like the amount of times they die doesn't matter if they're having a good time. So it's just watching their face really. And we did. So there's obviously we played like within the department, we played it lots, but obviously we got really good at it. So we had something called the Kareem test, and if you want to be really brutal on yourself, what you do is say, Kareem, can you come and play this? And I was like, Kareem's not a great player. And it would really highlight the stuff where we'd made it too hard, and so that's quite an important thing, because obviously when you're sitting playing the game all day, every day for years, you get pretty good at it. So having that external perspective, and Kareem was our favourite. Can this level survive Kareem? But also we did Sony had an amazing facility in London as well, where you have the one-way glass and all that kind of stuff, and and they get members of the public to come in, and I remember the first one that we did of that was just horrific. I mean, they just thought it was absolutely rubbish. It was so painful. Yeah. I mean, that is the thing with just in general with game development. I mean, it's that it is so fun developing games, but that first time when people play it and they just don't play it at all like you play it is just horrible.
I mean, for earlier when you mentioned Kareem, I thought you had misremembered and actually was referring to Alex, because he was the worst.
Alex was terrible. Levels. Yeah. I think Alex was one of those, like, Alex. Oh, we all felt like that Alex was kind of, doing mysterious, amazing things, so we didn't want to disturb him too much. Whereas Kareem was much more kind of welcoming.
That's a nice way to put it. Oh wow! But maybe going to more the level creation aspect. I'm sure you knew about the 3D layer glitch, right? That exploited the whole Z-depth thing, because LittleBigPlanet has the capability to actually go beyond 3 layers, but you guys limited it to 3, but there were some people who were able to use that glitch in the community to extend it to like infinite both ways.
Like, infinite, but
pretty much like it would go both ways, like back and forth in Z space. Did you see any like community levels using them? Did you play a whole lot of community levels?
That's at the beginning, yeah. There was I remember when we interviewed John Beach. He's currently he's currently creative director now at MM, and I remember when he was a community member, and then he applied for a job, and then obviously got the job. But I remember when he came in, he said, like, we're talking about the layers or something, and it's I was saying that 7 layers, and he said, no, there's 10 layers, and so I remember that glitch, but I don't remember one which could do infinite. Right? Okay. Yeah, I mean the 10-layer glitch was as a result of the there was those internal layers, thin layers, and
thin and thick and all those. Yeah.
So things like there was sort of like an extra couple of layers to stop you from jumping through. So if you could stand inside something to stop you jumping through the front of it, that one.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that there was a stiletto that I made. It was really cool, actually. It's a shame this one didn't, because this was going to be in the sort of the Tokyo scene, Akihabara thing. So there was I made an Akira bike out of sort of two pool balls and then a spoon, and then it was made out of like a red stiletto, and it looked like the Akira bike, and but kind of like made out of spoons and bits and pieces and all that kind of thing. And that had that's what sort of started it, as in having an extra layer to stop it from jumping out off the front or the back. And and apparently people did stuff with that. But yeah, the infinite thing, no, I don't remember that at all. Wow.
Yeah.
How did they do that then?
So I don't remember the specifics, and when I say infinite, like, it looks like it is going like infinitely in one direction. When you look at it from a side profile or kind of a little bit above, you can see it looks like it's just continuing on and on. And so that was big in the community. And about the 10 layer thing, I know we talked about like the thin and thick layers, but I think there were also like a couple of extra sub layers that were like thack and theck, I think.
Yeah, that.
However, those were named. Those are interesting layer names. And speaking of,
what were they called?
I think it was Thek and Thack. I think. Yeah, just weird extra.
It was probably some joke about something. 'Cause, often we would just sort of squawk out random words and things, and then that would become something in the game.
Wow.
Oh, it's so funny. That's so funny hearing that.
And about I guess glitches. Did you have a favorite glitch in LittleBigPlanet 1 and
Absolutely.
2 respectively?
I can't remember. I think it must have been I can't remember if it was 1 or 2, but the Overlord glitch.
Yeah.
I loved that so much. I just thought that was just hilarious, and just so clever. And I love that people do that. And I guess just for people who don't know what that is, there was somebody figured out that you can attach an emitter to Sackboy, wasn't it? That was it. And then so he made there's an amazing sort of spaceship thing, and then put the spaceship inside the emitter, and then made it so that if you were in the pod where you couldn't create stuff, it would emit that ship inside the pod. And when we all saw it, we were just like, oh, but oh no, it was really it was one of those things where, what kind of level breakages is this going to cause now? So, I think there was the next patch we fixed it, but it was almost a shame. But at the same time, there was definitely some things where, because there's always that thing, like I was saying before, that there's bits of roughness in levels and things like that, where there's things that shouldn't be in there have just been left in there and all that kind of stuff. And I do remember actually that like one guilty secret was that there was some physics stuff. Do you know about those bits?
Yeah.
But of course you know about that. I thought I was confessing, and of course you know about that. But that was towards the late bit of LBP2. It was an optimization thing, so we just couldn't get the thing to work on frame rate. The big thing was just when you've got 4 players playing online, there's a massive load there, so it just meant that it was really the frame rate was really bad, and so we just decided to sort of defizz, take the physics off a lot of the unnecessary bits around the level. And the bit which sort of really didn't sit right with me was the fact that the whole game philosophy was that you can do what we do, and we were absolutely honest about all of that. Apart from that, we did provide it eventually, but it was one of those things that it just made me feel dirty.
Right. Well, I don't think it's just that, because there is another thing, and that is the motorbolt that has a higher speed cap, or like a higher speed that was assigned to it than the max allowed speed for a normal motorbolt in the game. I remember vividly that was used on a couple of things, I think, in the story mode, and it was probably done through the PC editor, because there was there was like a 360 cap, like RPM, 3,600 RPM cap on a motorbolt, but there were a couple of instances where it was like way beyond that on some of the already made story mode levels. It was like 8,000 RPM. It was way faster.
Is this LPP 1 or 2?
1, I think.
That's so funny. I mean, because I'd say probably, I don't know if it's accurate, but I reckon about 50%, maybe less actually, maybe about 30% was made in the editor. So while until we actually had the tools to use the actual controller, we were making stuff in the editor, so that would make sense. I don't think anyone would have sneakily gone in there and changed it because the pop it would have been capped or something. Like if it had been needed, we would have just made the cap higher. So yeah, I think it's probably just legacy stuff that it was made before we had that, and
yeah. About the dephysicalizer, you mentioned being able to dephysicalize things, and I know about the tool, but do you happen to know why it didn't make it into LittleBigPlanet 1 as a pop-it item, but it did in LittleBigPlanet 2?
It was again, it was a real. There was a battle. There was a battle regarding all of this stuff, and Kareem's original vision was that if you wanted something up in the air, you build stuff and hold it up, and because that's what creates an aesthetic, is the limitations of what your tools are, just like real life, create a visual. So all the levels will be up on stilts if you wanted it high up in the air and all that kind of thing. I remember when Mark, then he came up with the dark matter material, and that was just a very pragmatic thing of like, do I want to spend my time making stilts which aren't going to be on screen, or do I just want to just place a little lump of this down? And so obviously that was a shift in kind of philosophy, and I think sort of conceptually and visually, I think some things were lost as a consequence, but the practical thing won out. And then the de-fizzing thing, I think how do I feel about that even being in there at all? For LBP2, it was just a necessity just to get the performance running properly. And then I think, I can't remember, it might have been a patch or something that it actually was given as a tool. And but I'm not sure, is it better to have that as a thing? And I can see people have used it for good reasons and all that. Is it a better game with that? I think it undermines certain things behind it. So, and this is always that battle, isn't it? Of kind of, how much is it practical? How much is it kind of empowering? And I remember there was a whole load of stuff, for instance, with on the same thread of stuff of how much you can scale those objects. So those objects were a very contentious things. So you have your kind of procedurally generated stuff, and then you've got the actual objects. And then the question is those objects, could you just scale, like an apple, so it's absolutely massive? Yeah. And I remember there was a big battle about that as well. And Kareem, rightly so, is that the thing about those objects is it sets the scale of the game, and almost like the beauty and the kind of the whole point of it was that it's a miniature world which you can relate to. It's the sort of thing you would have made as a child and all that kind of stuff. And those items are fundamental in giving you that world, that it's a real world. And they were quite keen. So for instance, like even the rendering style was sort of done almost as if you've got a camera, and and I remember the English country garden, that was the wall in Mark's garden. All of this kind of stuff was very intimate. But as soon as you can then get an apple and just make it massive, it's like, well, it's just a sort of game asset, and it looks quite rubbish at that kind of scale, and it's sort of weirdly stretched in these axis but not in the Z. So all of these things are as a battle, but then I can't even remember how it was resolved. I think there might have even just been some hard cap when you scaled the apple to a certain level, it stopped scaling, and then that just made it really unusable for people because, why stop there?
Right.
So, and I think that might have been a sort of really muddy, not good solution to the whole thing. But these are the kind of things that we were fighting with all the time. So, thief is, like, I bet there's a whole load of people go, no, it's essential. We need it. I've used it for all of these things, and it's absolutely brilliant. And there's other people who say, actually, I think probably less people who say, but it sort of undermines the world that you're creating in. But I think, for me, I think the world it was done in was extremely strong, and I think that's the thing which made people love the game, as opposed to just say an editor or something. So I think to sort of it's important to hold these things sacred, I think, when making a game, because that is what people emotionally connect to, even though and that was the balance we were having to do for the whole time.
I remember one of the posts you made on your website regarding LittleBigPlanet dealt with where levels were published in the game. And you mentioned how Antarctica was one of the places people publish levels in the community, maybe as a joke. How were you able to see where people published levels? Was it through the telemetry?
Yeah, there was a. How did we know that? I'm pretty sure we had a thing which had a map which had little dots where it was done. So when it was first released, I remember, God, that was mad feeling. It was such a mental thing, like you just sort of in this tunnel of development, and then it goes live, and there's a big TV in the middle of the studio, and everyone was standing around it, and I can't even remember what the actual interface was, but it was essentially a map. It must have been a map. It wasn't text, and there was little dots of where things had been published, and we looked and we're like, oh my God, that's in Antarctica. Like, who is doing that? Which was mental. I mean, I remember just like that. I think that was the moment when I realized what's actually happened. Because, that's the thing, is that, like, with all these kind of things, is that there's the fun bit, and then there's the hard bit, and then there's the bug bit. That bit, like, I'm dying. I'm really dying here. But that thing of just like, wow, this is so much bigger than my sort of little tunnel of the tasks which I was sort of obsessing about. It was very cool.
Going back to levels, was making levels in LittleBigPlanet 1 easier than in LittleBigPlanet 2?
Well, you had the full, like, so I'd say the making stuff with the the PlayStation controller came in around about halfway through, I'd say. Maybe when I say halfway through making levels properly. So, maybe in the last sort of year or something. So obviously we were doing the editor and things like that before that, for all of its things. So, like LittleBigPlanet 2, the great thing about that, and probably the reason why it feels more polished, was that the tool set on the whole, like the basic engine was complete, from the beginning. So, like it was unbelievable what we had to work with right at the beginning of LBP1. So it's I mean, obviously it's more fun in a way when things haven't been defined, but it comes at a real cost of being really annoying. Like, so things like the physics engine not being established, it's like, if you if you want a bit where you relies on the physics and then the physics changes halfway through, then you've got to remake that thing. So there was a lot of that going on, but at the same time we kind of knew that at the beginning that it doesn't matter because we're just trying to figure it out. But I definitely remember there was a transition period in LBP1 where right, you have to ship a game now. And then so with that pressure and then certain things not quite working. So even though I remember there was a thing where if a really big block lands on something, imagine you make some kind of contraption for it to destroy it elegantly. And because before that, if it would just intersect with it, and it would have this physics explosion, and they were always happening, those physics explosions. And obviously when this tech came in, great, and it doesn't have these physics explosions and also sort of elegantly just destroys the thing. But how you tweak that matters. So what does it destroy when it hits? What's the forces? I can't even remember what the sort of factors which you took into account in order to break that. But obviously that got checked in, and then all the levels break because it was a little bit too forceful in terms of how it destroys stuff. So you're dealing with all this stuff continuously, and but obviously LVP2 was all of that had been nailed, and all the system had been nailed. That everyone had a lot more experience making the levels and all that. So it was, it definitely felt like, it was more tweaking, isn't it? LVP2 but obviously that sort of stuff also was a bit buggy and things sometimes. But on the whole, it was good. So I'd say like LVP1 was great because it just felt like new discovery, doing like we don't know what we're doing, and LVP2 was great because you can have an idea in your head and then make it. They're both good for very different reasons.
How long ago did you play? Did you last play community level, and which one would you say was your favorite one?
Oh, I don't know. There's loads of different ones actually. I remember in LVP1 there was there were lots of good ones for different reasons. I remember someone just made a calculator, for instance. That was one of the very early ones, and that was just using the logic. But like, I don't even understand how you would do that. I don't actually understand how calculators even work. But so there's things like that. There was things like, which I remember there was a first-person shooter type thing going on in there. And then there was just really funny stuff, like the one with the shark. It just really makes me laugh. And there was some amazing cinematic stuff. I remember there was one sort of like set in like the Arabian desert type thing, and it actually just looked like a film. And it's funny that the quality is so good, like for all its very specific reasons, and like one of the things that strikes me is just people are just so funny. What they come up with, and you think, oh my god, that came out of your brain.
Right.
I'm attracted to the beautiful ones, and I'm also attracted to the just downright funny, and also the ones where they really just use things in a way where I just wouldn't ever think of that. I think they're my main ones, really.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you were around for this, but I'm pretty sure it was the exact opposite case with the Friends and Family beta. Were you around for that with Alex? When that came out? It was the very first beta. It was like for people at PlayStation, friends of people at PlayStation. He mentioned the first beta was absolutely awful. There were like 50 levels, and every one of them apparently had like vulgar references in them, and were just completely like just trash. There was one where it was like a Millennium Falcon, and it came down and confetti sprayed, and that was it. That was the level. So it's interesting to hear about that. And
I remember that there was a thing, I don't know if we talked about it, where when it first released, there was a thing where there was this feedback loop in terms of like, if people play something, it comes up high on the list, and then it means that people play that thing. And it was ramp or something, wasn't it? It was something really simple.
Yeah.
And it was just like, you just sort of fly off, and it was like that's what was sort of trending highest, and that was because the algorithm in terms of choosing stuff wasn't great. And I remember stuff like that where it's like, oh no.
About the server shutdown, you mentioned it was sad. What are your overall thoughts on it when you first heard about it?
I think I understand that economics and all of that. I understand all that. I think the way it was done, it's one of those things. Is that do the people who make these calls appreciate just quite how much work has gone into that? It's 10 million levels. It's just sort of like, if you were to just upload empty levels, that's still a lot of work, let alone the kind of works of art and all the funny stuff and clever stuff in there. And it's one of those things where when you really take that into account of what the value of that is, I think that there could have been a much more kind of like acknowledgement of that. I think. I mean, I might have missed some of it. I don't know, but from the sense I got was that it was all quite abrupt. But it just kills the whole thing, isn't it? I mean, because that's the thing, is that it's funny because it's one of those things. I love people just being clever and just breaking stuff and just fiddling with stuff and all that, and like things like the that thing where you could attach the emitter to Sackboy, all of that. But the thing which I really loved about that is they'd gone to the time to make this cool-looking spaceship thing, which went inside that, and to sort of use the exploit in a fun way. And that's the thing, is that exploiting stuff, that's what makes humans amazing, in my opinion. Like being able to sort of find these things, but at the same time using it in a negative way where everyone loses out just seems really counterproductive and not fun, actually.
Right.
It's very sad.
Yeah. And at the same time, LittleBigPlanet has had a positive impact on tons of people. And with you, I'm curious, how did LittleBigPlanet change your life from you getting a job at Media Molecule to where you are now? Where did you see yourself after LittleBigPlanet 2? Did they approach you to work on LittleBigPlanet 3 or even Sackboy Big Adventure?
No, so three was that was always planned that 3 would be outsourced to Sumo, and it meant so that then they would free up Media Molecule then to work on Dreams. So that was the original plan. But in terms of my experience, it's one of those things of, on a sort of very zoomed out thing, it's what's being able to see what's possible when people, when really sort of amazing people work together. It's really, it's that kind of thing where it was definitely a highlight in terms of creative collaboration, which I've not actually had in anything as intense as that before. I mean, obviously, it's one of those things where it comes at a cost. It's not. It's very easy to look at it as a kind of rose-tinted way, and I definitely do look at it in a rose-tinted way. But it was very intense. I'm not sure if I could sustain that for 20 years, something like that. But at a moment in history, because it was a real moment, because there's things like connecting consoles to the internet, that's what was happening at the time, Web 2.0 and all that kind of, and surfing that wave, that it felt like it was something much bigger than any one of us kind of thing, and that's definitely something which has remained for me, of just and it's there's the individual people who are great, and then there's kind of the team, which is great, and then there's all the creators around the world, which is great. There was Sony as well and all that kind of thing, but it was all of those people sort of directing in the same thrust and just really enjoying it is amazing. And then the other thing, I guess, is that I'm still friends with all these people. I've not been at MN since, what was it? I think after Dreams, and but yeah, some of my best friends from that office, and it's one of those things where I think madness attracts madness, and it was a group of maddos which were we just fit together, and it's I don't know, we'll have to see what happens in the future, but I'd love to. I have worked with lots of them since, and but all that team together, that was something special. And I don't know whether that's going to happen again, really. But you know, yeah, it was a very, very special time.
Yeah. Do you prefer Dreams or LittleBigPlanet's creation aspect?
I mean, you know, I liked. There were things I liked about Dreams. I on the whole, I had my reservations from the beginning with it. I thought it was too complicated, and you know, I felt like the LBP really hit the spot between. It was a perfect balance between simple and empowering. I think Dreams kind of went like way, you know. I mean, it was like it's incredible. Dreams. You know, I'll give it its dues. It's incredible what you could do with it, but the cost of it is that it's too complicated. I think like I couldn't make stuff very well in it, and you know, and just even things like the electronics system of it. Its baseline started at the most advanced of LBP, and that I think that just made it made the kind of the target audience so narrow, and I don't know, it just felt more like actual game dev as opposed to just fiddling around, you know, having fun with things, and so yeah, it's I think Dreams was definitely technically amazing. You know, there's no doubt about it. And I think a lot of people didn't even get to really understand why it's so amazing. I mean, even just things like, how do you send these million poly things down the internet and all of that? That was incredible, the technology behind that. But, you know, obviously, like, I'm sure most people didn't even consider that kind of thing. And I even loved how that even happened in the first. Did Alex talk about that?
He talked about, like, with Dreams, he didn't like the fact that it didn't have like a central character. Like, technically it was amazing, but from a story creative perspective, there was no character to it, right? You just had that little cursor.
A little cursor, essentially. Yeah. But I mean, the way that he managed, I guess this is going to a bit far from LBP, but I mean, LBP was amazing in terms of, obviously, like, not everyone even had broadband at the time. I think broadband was maybe coming in, but just to be able to just send the vectors across and all that was a great way of sending the information. But with the Dreams, he literally sat and watched, Alex sat and watched Francis make something, and with that he realized that he could just track what Francis does, the instructions of what Francis does, and send those instructions so it's rebuilt at the other end, on the other side of the telephone wire kind of thing, rather than sending the mesh itself, because the meshes were sort of gigabyte size. So imagine you've got a scene with, you know, 100 objects or something. It's going to take a million years to download. And so yeah, but I just love that fact that Alex just sat and watched someone make something and realized if you just send the instructions of how to make it by watching him, that's how you can do these things. So Dreams was just full of stuff like that, and yeah, it's almost too much in a way. Like even things like the audio stuff, like it's fantastic toys and things like that. But I bet so many few people even knew how to use it. So I mean, the fact that it didn't get a Brady Games, you know, one of the books of telling you all of the things is probably quite indicative. I loved when we got those Brady Games things for LVP. It was so nice because, you know, I was just reading through it, going, "Oh my gosh, someone's actually discovered all the things which we've done," you know. And there wasn't dreams. It's probably because they looked at it and went, "This is going to be about, you know, 1 million pages if it was."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your role on Dreams? What did you like and not like about it? What was your, like, favorite creation on there that you saw?
So I was on there. That was a bit patchy because I actually went off and did other things for a bit. So I was there for the first. I think the sort of the core team was working on it for a year. I came on it after that year, and there was quite a long period where it felt very lost as a thing. So we had it was called the Blob Editor at the time. So we had the sort of sculpting thing. So Anton had made that, and so there was quite a lot of using that. But in terms of like what is the game, And at the time, the philosophy was that, LBP started off as a game, and then we went into a creative tool kind of thing. And this one was to start with a creative tool, make that fun, and then make a game from it. Like, I think that was fundamentally problematic. I think, I think ultimately you do need to start off with a game, and the game came very late. So the first sort of few years of me being on Dream, I mean, we were kind of looking at other stuff. So rather than it being like a level maker kind of thing, there was things like, how do we just do creative games and things? Like, I remember one concept I did was so imagine you've got a scene that you set up, then so you can then set this as a challenge, and then you've got to then subvert that scene by swapping out objects and things like that. So that was one way of using the sort of create tools in a gamey way. So it's like, I remember there was one which this sort of video I did, and it was like a proposal. So someone sort of asked someone to marry them, and then like imagine the competition to just sort of fiddle with that for funny outcomes and all that kind of thing. So I think that something like that could have potentially worked. It all just felt a bit wobbly, though. It didn't. So there was a load of ideas and things like that. There was ideas about making it sort of more massively multiplayer and all that kind of thing. But we kind of had the sculpting tool as the sort of thing which most people had accepted, and we were having to design around that. And I think that was what made it quite challenging to develop for. So and it went on for too long. I mean, it was almost like the opposite of LBP, and I do put that down to that. With LBP, Dave had made a great game. Like, it was very simple, the Yellowhead demo, but there was all the ingredients of a game there, which felt fresh. I mean, just, it's easy to take this stuff for granted, but like a physics-based platformer, there wasn't anything else like that where you could grab things and all that kind of thing. And the 2D of it also translated really well to very simple construction, whereas Dreams, because it was inherently 3D, I think for asking just general people to be able to make something in 3D, I think is too much, really. So so I think there was a sort of fundamental problems, but at the same time, like, people did make amazing stuff. But again, this is only sorry if I sound like I'm down, but there was things like, when people make something amazing, it's almost harder to understand that it's amazing. There was some really sort of like absolutely cinematic stuff in Dreams, but I look at it and go, is that a film then? Because it's almost so good. Whereas in LBP, like, they'll be making cardboard versions of something, so it's already got like a twist to it. And also, because of its limits, that if someone suddenly makes a 3D first-person shooter in LBP, it's inherently cool because you shouldn't be able to do that, and that's what made it innovative and interesting to me. Whereas in Dreams, because you can make anything, it sort of didn't have that angle to it, and it just seems weird, doesn't it? Because you'd think that you always want more power, but it made it muddy to me sometimes, where you think, well, would that have been could you just make it in Unity then, or something like that? So yeah, I don't know. It was I have very mixed feelings about that project.
No, that's fair. Like, everyone is entitled to their own opinions. I don't think there should be like any form of censorship here. Alex literally said that Dreams was just not the best. He said it outright. And going on the track of talking about 3D a little bit, do you think Sackboy Big Adventure was a step in the right direction after LittleBigPlanet 3?
I don't even know what it is. What is it? Sorry.
Sackboy Big Adventure. So it was it's the most recently released LittleBigPlanet spin-off title.
Okay.
It was released 4 or 5 years ago. So Sackboy is the main character, and he kind of goes through these worlds, but it's 3D. And
was that Sumo who made that?
Was it what?
Was that Sumo who made that?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played it, so I don't know. It's has that got all the full create tools and everything to it?
No, it has no create mode.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where it's one of those things where they're they're taking a brand essentially, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
because ultimately I think it's the whole thing is the fact that you could create stuff and create stuff in a very particular way as well. It's so yeah, but I also remember the same thing with the cart as well, and we were all sort of laughing, saying as soon as they make a cart version, and they actually have.
Right. When you mean cart, do you mean like racing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the LBP cart.
That's so funny because we're interviewing the director of production on that game tomorrow.
Because the thing is that I actually thought that what was the game called before that, before it got reskinned?
I think it was Mod Nation Racers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? Say it again?
Mod Nation Racers 2.
That's it. Yeah. I thought that was cool. I love the fact that you could drive a track and all that kind of thing. I thought that was brilliant. And then obviously it's sort of, it just got reskinned. And, I feel for the team who made that. And, it's one of those things that it's a cool idea. And I don't know, but I also get the sort of marketing kind of, the drivers behind it. But yeah, I think, when it comes down to these kind of things, I'm quite purist when it comes down to these things, that ultimately it's got to come from, something deep inside you. And I think that's why LBP was so good, because it was like, I guess it's that thing of Dave had a kind of amazing seed of a game which everyone could get behind and everyone got, and then everyone could just sort of bring whatever they had in them to that. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you strike something, the right thing, where just even like the whole craft thing, everyone gets it and they can get behind it and all that kind of thing. And I think that's why it worked. But as soon as you start getting that visual, then and then applying it to something else, it's sort of one step removed in a way, and it doesn't make as good stuff really. Not that I think it was terrible at all. It was, but I do get that. So I just felt for the studio when I'm sure they got told at one point, oh, by the way, it's going to be this now.
Right. Right.
I wouldn't like that happen to me.
No, that would be hard. And it's interesting because a lot of the people from the San Diego development team, a lot of them apparently didn't do that much. And it's understandable because it was just a reskin mainly. I mean, you had some story elements, but that was mostly because of, like, I would assume the producers and maybe a couple of the head designers kind of spearheading that whole thing. And going on the track of, like, I suppose maybe even having a new game, do you think a hard reboot of LittleBigPlanet would be warranted? Or like a LittleBigPlanet 4 game that builds on top of the existing games? Which one do you think is better? Hard reboot or LittleBigPlanet 4 that has like the backwards compatibility?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I remember when they did LBP 3, when Sumo took that, I was quite relieved that they took that, because it was one of those things that I felt like I'd done everything that I'd want to do in 2, and it was one of those things where I guess there's a certain amount is kind of like what I would like to make kind of thing. I think if you were to make, like, I guess the question is why? Like, why would you make a thing? So, did you want it better graphics? I guess is a question of why you would do it now, and it's that. I guess that's a reason to sort of up-res it. I mean, I'm much more in line with taking the spirit of why it was good and making something new, I guess, in that kind of thing. Like, yeah, definitely. It was fun. I remember somebody in Dreams. I remember somebody was talking about making a full Sackboy pack for it, and they're asking me about it and whether I wanted to do it, and I just didn't want to do it at all. And they were quite surprised. They were like, I thought you'd be really into that, and I was like, but why? Like, why is that good? Maybe I'm just being too grumpy or whatever. But like, for instance, what you've done is a different thing altogether. Like, you've just kept the actual thing alive. That's a very, very different thing. And but to remake it, I don't know. I mean, like, I would like to, I mean, you know, something which I really like the idea of. This is during the Dreams time, was, you know, something where you can create on a much more massive scale in terms of, and something really with the same messiness and all that kind of stuff, with more players kind of thing at the same time. That is what I was hoping Dreams would become, and it kind of passed the time when that could happen. But something like that, where it's something new, something which you know, which pushes technology to where it is. Because I don't know, like, other than graphics, just recently I'm not sensing the sort of the technology being pushed. You know, I don't know. I feel like there's something there where all the things which LittleBigPlanet did, and the vibe of it as well. There was something, you know, like innocent but not lame about it. There was something, you know, something cool about that, but something which can capture all of those things: the innovation, the kind of the co-creating together, all of that kind of thing. That's what I'd like to see. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, does that have Sackboy in it? I think a cameo would be great, but I don't necessarily think that you know, he fitted within the world of craft. And if this thing was craft, then I wouldn't object to it, but I feel like there's something else you can do.
Right. No, that's fair. And I mean, I suppose in terms of, like, more things that you can do, if we go back to maybe the idea of LittleBigPlanet, right, with all the DLC packs and everything. I mean, there were quite a few of them. I don't think we ever got to this, but what would you say was not only your favorite, like, DLC level or DLC pack, but also what was your favorite story mode level? Curious.
Right. Okay. Ooh, I don't know. You know, I think, like, on the first, that's the story mode. What is in? Yeah, the Tower of Whoop definitely was the most fun for me. Like we all just played that forever in the office. You know, I was like, in terms of the league, I was probably sort of about halfway down the bottom, with obviously Kareem and Alex at the bottom. They both played it. But in terms of fun and replayability, I thought it was just fantastic, that level. In terms of my favorite DLC, you know, I must admit, the MGS pack was, I thought that was really good. It was the first one we did, and you know, the story behind that as well is, I remember, you know, that was a time when they were talking about doing all these tie-ins and things with licenses and all that kind of thing. I think it was to begin with, we were doing Disney, I think, and they actually all went to Disney and to go and talk to them about it. And I did this thing of Steamboat Willie. Have you seen that?
I think so. Yeah.
You have seen that, like that. Yeah, I did a thing where it's like that Steamboat Willie thing made in LBP style. I did that, and I also did one of Wall-E as well, where it starts off as a box and it sort of unfolds and all that kind of thing. Just using pictures and then sticking it on the stickers and all that. And yeah, it was funny. I remember Kareem coming back saying, you know, they've talked about a deal, and he was like, yeah, but, you know, those dudes, they have parks. Where are we in the negotiating thing? It's just sort of, wow. Like, it's just a different scale altogether. But the Metal Gear Solid one was definitely very exciting as a prospect to work on. But to begin with, it was I remember everybody was really knackered from shipping the game, and to begin with, it was, you know, right, you're not going to have any tech support. This is just a content pack, and make something fun, and it was all just, you know, a bit rubbish. I think the only thing we got was that you could set the angle on the thing sensor, so because at least we could do some kind of you know, stealthy type gameplay. But I remember Mark had been on holiday, and Mark, just because we're all a bit depressed, because going like, we can't actually make anything good here. And then I remember Mark coming back from holiday and going, "Oh, I think we should have a gun." And it's like, that just changed everything.
Wow.
And that was very cool in the end. I thought, but that's just what Mark does. He's got such an amazing kind of intuitive like thing where he just goes, "Oh, I think that or that," and so that was very cool. But obviously it's an amazing franchise to work with, and I think he even said that he liked it, which was like, wow.
Right. What do you think was your favorite rare DLC? I know there was the Crown, there was the Beta Vest, the Beta Bug Blaster. What's your favorite?
I must admit, I wasn't that involved with that stuff. It was, I think that was more, because unless it had sort of like levels and things with it, it was, right. It was more the art team dealing with all that kind of stuff. My favorite costume piece is just, again, this is all the really old stuff, but I just loved the Chinese dragon. I thought that was, I just thought it was fantastic. And I think they had that when I first saw the demo. And that's just Francis just being Francis.
Right.
Yeah, it was so nice. But but again, it's just I loved all the costumes, the way that they all just fit together and worked and were mad, and I loved seeing people play, and it's like, wow, you chose that to wear. All of that, really simple things, but like so many times I was watching people play and they're literally just pressing the randomize and just choosing costumes, and they're doing that for half an hour, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
It's like addicting almost. It's even funnier because Jim Noir, the guy who made that My Patch song that you guys put in the second level, I think it was Meerkat Kingdom, right? With the stripper poles and everything.
That was me.
That was you. Oh my goodness! Well,
Very basic.
I'm gonna ask, what were the inspirations behind that? Like,
a fetch quest, and it was one of them. I think the meerkats were just started off like there's the ones that sort of just poke through the ground. I don't even think they even had any gameplay function. It was just funny. It was the thing. It was there's so much stuff which was like that, and I remember the meerkat mom. That was very much based on Totoro. So the bit when she goes into the Totoro's lair and she's sort of bouncing on his belly. It's that was definitely from there. But so much of it was just from films and just random stuff. It's it's funny because I don't think we fought that much. There wasn't so. I mean, there was things like the philosophy of the game, but in terms of making the content, it was just quite spontaneous that things were happening, and obviously like the sort of cardboard characters. Most of those were made by Francis. I really remember there was the guy. Was it in New York where he had sort of an afro in a karate outfit?
Yeah, Z-Dude.
Why is he wearing a karate outfit? I've got no idea. And then when you actually take that apart, if you take and how he's used the stickers, because it's made of some really random stuff. That it's like if you look at it and it makes sense. You take the stickers off and then you realise he's just. I don't know. What goes on in Francis's mind? I don't know.
Right. Well, so I brought up My Patch because Jim Noir, we interviewed him last. He was talking about this deals with the costume stuff. He was the exact opposite, apparently, compared to most people, where he would just leave his Sackboy plain, just nothing on him.
Nudist.
Right. just be with it, with simple nature, which is
I get that. That's cool.
Pretty fascinating.
Funny enough, in terms of when you're saying about sort of DLC, the things which didn't make sense. I remember when that T-shirt first came out. It just had that stack. They had the LBP tree on it, and I think it cost £7 or something like that. That was quite a lot of outrage. I remember that going, oof, that was a mistake. Why did that? I'm sure that wasn't even the decision made in the office either. That was a Sony thing.
Right. By the way, I'm curious on the topic of that, like the models used for Sackboy and like the special 3D models just used throughout the game. So you mentioned, I don't know if you were involved with this, but like, I know LittleBigPlanet uses what are called mole files, which I think was kind of a joke because like mole can stand for model, but also molecule as well.
Yeah, I think it is the molecule. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was kind of the process for getting 3D models into the game? Did you have like a mole converter where you could take like an object out of, say, 3ds Max and convert it into a mole that could then be put into the game?
I remember it being really smooth, the thing. It's yeah. I don't think there was even any exporting or anything like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was really good. It was one of those things, and I think that was Alex who was behind that. It might have been Alex or Dave, I don't know, but it was the whole tool pipeline there was brilliant, really, really brilliant. And like I say, it had the live update thing as well. But I don't remember that being. I just remember it being amazing. Actually, I was really impressed when I first started using it. And but again, it's just sort of removing all the steps as much as possible. And obviously, tools nowadays are fantastic for that. But back then, from what I've heard about what the equivalent things were going on in the industry, I think it was really painful just to do anything like that. So,
oh wow,
yeah. I remember it being quite seamless. Even just stuff like if you were to make an asset, for instance. You would God, blimey, it's all coming back now. So you would just draw a spline in 3D Studio Max to dictate the physics shape of it. And so it was kind of like you could do all of that in 3D Studio Max, and then when it exports, it comes readily. It interprets that material, makes it into a proper physics shape, and then you can then joint it and things like that. Like, I remember for the Tsuzuki market scene, I made quite a lot of fish. I think a few fish heads made it into the game, but I actually had quite a few really gross looking fish, and I really regret not pushing more of that into it because it had a slightly macabre feel to it, and I wish we had more of that kind of stuff because it's as a counterbalance. But yeah, you could sort of have like flappy mouths to it, and it'd be all sort of skinned and wobble and all that kind of thing. And then you could grab the fish, obviously, and then sort of fling it over you and all that kind of thing. But yeah, the tools were really really fantastic. And I think you could also do. I think you could use vertex colors to dictate how much it flaps. So things like the cloth. Like, do you remember in the very first? I think it was the GDC demo when there was a big sheet, and then when you put the sticker, it sort of responded. Again, that's another thing where we had cloth and just it sort of got a bit forgotten about along the way. But yeah, it was you can do that by vertex weights. So and also the costumes and things like that, all the floppy bits, you could just sort of do that. So it was just very intuitive for the artists to do their stuff. And that's the thing is that if you make the tools nice, then it just means that people can be bothered to do it.
Right.
On a very basic level.
Right. Well, it must have been pretty easy to do the animations too, because the animations were exported as separate anim files, is what they were called.
Yeah.
And that's what Sackboy uses as well for all his like facial expressions and movements. So it's really interesting to hear about that, because I was always intrigued by like the process of getting these 3D models into the game. I will ask Alex more about that, because more about the technical aspects, because I'm a nerd for that stuff. No, that's really great. And I mean, with level design, what was it like, kind of like building out that volcano level? I think it was in the islands, the Japanese Zen theme, I suppose. What was it like building that out? Didn't you make the volcano level?
Volcano level. What happened to the volcano level?
So where you started out at the dojo.
You in the floaty thing?
Yeah.
Yes, I did that. Yeah, I did that one. Can't remember. I remember you just I remember just making that flying contraption thing and then just making a level around it. Was there a volcano in there?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, all right. I remember the sumo stompy thing. I made that as well, actually.
Oh,
God.
really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I can't
think
really.
I think you must have thought it was funny to because I remember the sumo, like where his ass is. There's like brown on it, brown stickering. It's funny.
I think that might have been Francis, either Francis or Sean, so because like, I sort of did it, and then there was like an art pass afterwards to
Yeah.
the whole thing. So that probably would have been Sean. Sean's a dark horse. He's a fantastic artist, but he's got a very dark sense. It might have been him.
Wow, that's
Oh
amazing.
wow! Oh, blimey! It's funny thinking about these things. It's it's a long time ago.
Right, right. It's been 16, 17 years
Yeah,
since the
gosh,
first
wow.
release of the game. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it'd be better to, I guess, and this will probably be our last question before I show you this whole cool thing, but yeah, what would you say? Because I think difficulty definitely helps keep memories in the bank. What would you say was the most difficult level to design for the story mode, not just for Little Big Planet 1, but for Little Big Planet 2 as well?
Difficult level to design. It's funny you should say that because it's I would almost say that none of them were that difficult because it was one of those things where they sort of start off with just having fun, like just fiddling with something, and then it would either become a level or it get chopped. So yeah, difficult isn't a word to I would describe the actual level making process because it's not like we sort of had a fixed idea about what we wanted and then tried to get there. Because I know like other games I've worked on where it's it's like you just keep trying to make something fun or whatever and you've got an idea and it just doesn't quite work. It was very much ground up the level making process. So it's like if it wasn't working within the first few minutes or whatever, you just move on to something else. So there was no, and there was kind of like so actually in LBP in LBP two, because obviously the story in LBP one wasn't really a story. LBP two had a much more kind of prescribed story. So there was actually like a story molecule actually for that. Because like the first one, it was we need a story because the feedback's coming back that no one understands the point and why we would play anything. And that was just me sort of going right quick. Need to think of something, and then we just sort of hotched it in at the end, like really, really, really late. So obviously, it's not Oscar winning. And but the LBP two from right from the beginning, because there was quite a lot of that. It was the thing, isn't it? The thing where the timeline, so you could start make sequencing cinematic stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was the feature that we were wanting to show off. We wanted the story to be much better. I mean, obviously, we just wanted the story to be better, but it was so there was a lot more time spent in terms of the characters and all that kind of stuff, and that is what caused problems in terms of difficulty of making levels. On the whole, most levels you kind of just make something fun and put it in there, but it makes it much more like there's certain gaps which have to happen, like certain things which have to happen with some gameplay, and which really strange. There was this big thing where it was sort of building up to having a battle in a big battle, and the original idea was to have a big battle gameplay thing going on there, and it was all getting very late, and we were like, we just need a level with a big battle in there. And I remember, I think it was Victor, because Victor was like, he's amazing, so he's like the star designer in many ways. And so we're like, come on, Victor, can you just make a level which has a big battle? Just and the thing with Victor is he's amazing. If you just leave him to it and he just makes stuff and you go, okay, right, that's great. We can put it here. But when you give him a brief, he just sort of goes, and then so we just made it a cutscene.
Oh, wow. So that explains it.
And it's one of those things where it's tricky. It's tricky. It was such a lame decision in the whole thing, and it's the story which definitely made it difficult, and it was one of those things that we sort of tended to like. Because Kareem is really big on story. He really loves story, and he got to do that in Dreams, for instance, in Art Stream. But he was always really frustrated by that, and I think part of it was that it was the nature of the team that, like, from my kind of like management angle, is that I would always prefer to do what the team does well rather than try and get them to do something else. And particularly with that bunch of characters as well. So that's why we sort of went for the ground up thing, and I think it suited in LBP because it's not the first one. In the story wasn't important. It was more just there's this whole thing, and but even stuff like there was all the huge spaceship, wasn't there, in LBP 2, and there was that big build up, and then it just sort of crashes straight away.
Yeah.
Again, that was just sort of like it was a very pragmatic thing. Like, we were seriously running out of time. It was with that project. It's weird because I think it took longer than LBP 1, but had less content in it, but yeah, I remember having to make loads of, which I think we slipped the deadline as well, which wasn't good. And but yeah, there was quite a few things where we had to make some pretty brutal cuts to it, and that was because we were trying to sort of fit it in with this overarching thing, and you kind of committed with the story,
right?
Certain things need to happen, and so I'd say they were the hard ones. Well, the hardest lessons.
Yeah, what were some of the cuts, if you remember, the biggest ones
in LBP 2?
2, yeah.
2, I mean, again, like, so it's funny how the first LBP 1 was supposed to be 12 themes with 3 sub themes in each, and it ended up 8 themes. And then LBP 2 ended up 6 themes. So I think there was other themes planned. Can't remember what they were now. Can't even remember when the actual cutting happened. But I mean, there was one thing which was upsetting. That there's those kind of sticker switch extra challenges and things like that. So they're at the first half of the game, and I thought they were absolutely brilliant, those things, because I love the idea that they kind of reshape a level you've just played, and you play in a totally different way. And that was made by 2 guys that we borrowed from Supermassive Games, and I thought what they did was absolutely fantastic. But making a level sort of, now you can use the grapple hook in it rather than what you had in there originally, and that was originally planned to be throughout the whole game. But again, it's just one of those things where it just sort of fizzled out. We just ran out of time. But I really liked that as a feature. I thought that was just really, again, it's that subversion where you think the level is one thing and then you do something and then it becomes something else. And the way they did it, I thought, was excellent. I thought, hats off to them for doing that. But I wish we had a little bit more time. There was a whole bunch of things, but it was really quite strict, that deadline, and so quite a few things. I think the thing with that was there was so much fun had in terms of making all the gadgets and doing all of that kind of stuff that used up a lot of time, and then in terms of content, it all just got a bit late.
We really appreciated having you on here. Absolute pleasure. And, just having you be able to share your insights with the Little Big Planet community regarding level design, and just your experience working on LBP as a whole, I think, is really amazing, especially after all these years. There's just still so much left to be uncovered, and I think your story has hopefully, in fact it definitely has, given people hope for the future of games, and also some nice little tidbits to go back down memory lane. So yeah, guys, that was Kengo Kurimoto, and we hope to, I don't know, maybe have you for part 2 in the future again. Absolute pleasure having you on here. And we'll see y'all next time. Make sure to, guys, stay subscribed to the YouTube channel, and keep an eye out for more interviews coming in the next few weeks. And keep LittleBigPlanet in your hearts. All right. Peace.